Cuando pienso en Educare, pienso en la educación de mis hijos. ¿Qué significa Educare para mí? Educare para mí significa un auxiliar para mi familia, porque cuenta con personal capacitado que nos orienta sobre la manera correcta de cómo educarlos. ¿De qué manera los maestros y el personal de Educare han hecho una diferencia para mis hijos, para mi familia o para mí? La manera en cómo han hecho esa diferencia ha sido al incluirnos en su programa. Muchas gracias.
Educare signifies more than just a daycare to me. It is a place that provides a child the tools they need to develop their learning skills, which is very important for us as parents. Educare and staff and teachers have made a very big difference for me.
Cuando pienso en Educare, pienso en un lugar donde mis hijos están seguros y que sé que están llenando su potencial que deben, o sea, las cosas que deben de estar haciendo para su edad. La verdad que mis hijos llegan con una sonrisa, se ven que están felices, que los tratan bien. Y todo el personal siempre ha sido siempre nos ha ayudado en todo lo que necesitamos. Siempre están dispuestos, siempre están arriba, encima de las cosas que necesitan. Cada vez que tengo alguna situación, y los contacto por cualquier cosa que ocurra, no nos dejan en el aire, siempre están ahí para nosotros y la verdad que me siento muy agradecida. Ha sido lo mejor que nos ha pasado a mí y a mi familia.
I think of family just because how everybody is with the kids here. Educare to me means that I have an opportunity to either do something with the time that I have that my child's at school, or basically try to accomplish something while she's at school. For my child, I would say she's learning even more than she would have if she would have been at home.
Thank you to all the parents who have shared their lived experiences with Educare with our entire network today. Thank you for submitting your videos. My name is Cynthia Jackson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Educare Learning Network. I'd like to take an opportunity to again welcome you to our network meeting. We hope that this year's meeting provides you with an opportunity to reflect, refresh, and reignite your commitment to the children, families, and communities, and your colleagues that you work with every day. I'd also like to take an opportunity to thank our current national funding partners, the Buffett Early Childhood Fund, George Kaiser Family Foundation, Richard Goldman Family Foundation, and Comic Relief USA with their signature program Red Nose Day, and the event is coming up this month. Trust for Learning, an anonymous donor, J.W. Bagley Foundation, and other local and local funders and partners and supporters joining us this week. So thank you to all of our funding partners. Just take an opportunity to provide some highlights of this year's network meeting. We will have 350 registrants, 50 speakers, representatives from all 25 Educare schools, 25 unique learning opportunities, and 22 live sessions. We also have live Spanish translation. So you can click on the globe icon and select Spanish. We also have closed captioning and transcription features this year as well. We encourage you to use the chat and the Q&A feature to ask questions and comments throughout today's sessions. Please note there are no registration requirements or limits for live sessions. Our on-demand session recordings have been also translated into Spanish. For the first time, we are live streaming our plenary sessions to a broader audience on YouTube. And so I'd like to also welcome those joining us through YouTube. All live sessions will be recorded and made available within 24 hours. As a reminder, your feedback is important to us. So please, as you participate in the sessions, also participate in completing our meeting evaluations throughout the week. We encourage attendees to view the event frequently asked question pages, which is located in the More section of the network meeting website. Also, please update your profiles and include a headshot, which helps us develop our online community. We also encourage you to check out the Instant Network Meetings option to meet one-on-one with network meeting attendees. Please join us also for our data dialogue sessions, which will happen tomorrow, Wednesday, May 11th at 11 o'clock a.m. Remember just the importance of research in our network, and we use research to inform both our practice, expertise, and our policy and advocacy. Each day of the meeting, we will host discussions where participants will have the opportunity to break into small groups and reflect on what you have learned throughout the meeting. We do really encourage you to join and engage with your colleagues from across the network in these informal engagement opportunities. And you can view your agenda for topics and upcoming opportunities for those one-on-one networking sessions. So now I'd like to share some information about a really, really special person, Portia Kennel, Senior Vice President at the Buffett Early Childhood Fund and former Executive Director of the Educare Learning Network. It is my honor and privilege to introduce my colleague, Portia Kennel. Many of you all know her or have heard her name, and today you'll have an opportunity to get to hear from her. This year, Portia is retiring from the Buffett Early Childhood Fund in her position as Senior Advisor to BECF. Prior to her time with the Buffett Early Childhood Fund, you all will remember that Portia served as Senior Vice President of Program Innovation at Start Early, formerly the Ounce of Prevention, and Executive Director of Educare Learning Network. Most importantly, in 2000, Portia created the first ever Educare school, Educare Chicago. As the Executive Director of the Educare Learning Network, she led the national expansion of the Educare model to a diverse range of communities. Portia is a former Head Start director whose work is grounded in an understanding of family systems and clinical issues related to working with families in low-income communities. She holds a master's degree in social work from the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, my alma mater also, and she is a 0 to 3 fellow. We are so grateful to Portia for her contribution to the early childhood field broadly and to the Educare Learning Network specifically. And we are delighted to spend some time today celebrating Portia.
Thank you, Cynthia. What a journey this has been. I have two hopes for the network's future that I want to share with you today. Reflecting on those early days, my mentor, Judy Bertocchi, came to mind. Judy was a pioneer leader in training early childhood staff how to implement and embed reflective practice and supervision into early childhood programs. Judy always said how important it was to get the birth story of each child because it will inform the work that you do with the family. So I am going to share the birth story of the network because I think it will inform the future as the network goes forward. Our first meeting ever of all the programs was attended by about 10 people. Yes, I said it, 10 people. We were all sitting around the table dreaming of changing the early childhood world. At that time, I brought us together for 3 reasons: to learn from each other, secondly, to support each other and problem solve together, and the third reason I brought us together was that I hoped by coming together, our collective power would have a better chance of addressing challenges in the field. In other words, I believed we could do more together than any of us could do alone. Fast forwarding 20 years to now, while all of these reasons are still good reasons to come together, in today's world, however, the most critical reason to come together going forward is to harness the collective power of the Educare Learning Network and leverage our collective power to transform the field. As I leave the network, my hope is that you will increase your collective impact efforts. The network has yet to realize its full potential. We all agree changes are needed to address the systemic issues that have plagued the early childhood system for so long. These issues have been amplified by the pandemic. To address these problems, more chairs are needed at the decision-making tables. And I believe some of those chairs must be filled by parents. The problems we want to solve and the changes we want to make will not succeed without the robust and sustained participation by parents who represents those families and children most affected by the inadequacies of the system we seek to change. In addition to the network's focus on racial equity, my hope is that the network will also prioritize our collective efforts to ensure the systemic and sustained participation and leadership of parents in the early childhood systems work. That means centering and elevating the voices of parents to ensure that their lived experiences inform and help address the challenges the system faces. I believe those close to the problem are closest to the solution. We're all in this together: parents, early childhood leaders, educators, family support, practitioners, child care providers, policy advocates, public and private partners. We must work together to find solutions. In closing, it has been an honor to help create the network, to be a part of this collective body and impressive work you have done through the years. Although I will no longer be a part of this gathering, my lifelong passion and commitment to serving children and families will continue in other ways because the work is not done yet. I thank Jesse and the Buffett Early Childhood Fund, Diana and Start Early for all they have done to support the continued growth and development of the Educare Learning Network. The network would not have been possible without the partnership and support of both organizations, and of course, the participation by all of you. Go forth, Educare Learning Network, and cause some good trouble. Thank you.
Please join me in a virtual congratulations and thank you to Portia Kennel. And I just personally want to acknowledge that 12 years ago, Portia invited me to serve as a leader of leaders in this network, and how grateful I am to have had the opportunity to serve under an African-American woman, mentor, teacher, visionary, colleague. Thank you, Portia, from the network and from me personally. What an innovator you have been. And we are position right now to do as you have challenged us to do, or offered up a way forward for us, which is to leverage our collective power as a strong network to continue to change the early childhood field. So thank you, and thank you, Portia. I would just like to say that over the last 2 years, Educare schools have continued to provide hope, connection, and much needed support to the communities, despite and in response to the immense challenges posed by the pandemic. Just as schools have shown up for communities, so too are we showing up for each other today in our 2022 network meeting. This 3-day meeting will provide a virtual space to come together, care for, and support each other's well-being. We will collectively re-energize and inspire one another to approach our critical work on behalf of children and families with a renewed sense of spirit and balance. I'd like to share a quote with you by Coretta Scott King. "The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate action of its members." It is with this compassionate spirit that we join together and plan the 2022 network meeting. I'd like to thank the network meeting steering committee for their dedicated work putting this meeting together, and also our conference and community affairs team led by Nick Parrish, Lindsay Gonka, and Nan Danette for the logistics and planning from end to end our network meeting. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, deemed by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children. We had no idea when we thought of focusing on mental health and well-being that this would be the month that would also be acknowledged as Mental Health Awareness Month as a network. I want to acknowledge our lived experiences of the pandemic, which saw us safely and cautiously continue to provide essential high-quality early care and learning and family support through our network of schools in each of the communities and through our partnership organizations, such as those in the Early Head Start Child Care community-based programs. Compassion, no doubt, however noble and necessary, can also have consequences, as we've heard countless stories of our own compassion fatigue, stress, depression, trauma, and mental health instability happening everywhere. It is with this understanding that we focus this network meeting on our own needs to reflect, refresh, and reignite our spirits. Over the last 3 years, we've focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, anti-racism, and anti-bias. And this network meeting is a blending of that into also mental well-being and emotional health. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our plenary speaker this morning. Professor Rhonda Magee, mindfulness teacher and author, professor of law at the University of San Francisco. Professor Magee will draw on both interdisciplinary research and 20+ years of scholarship, teaching, and practice to reveal the benefits of integrating embodied mindfulness, compassion-based mindfulness teachings and practices into the work of fostering quality, equity, and inclusion. Professor Magee will outline ways in which doing so promises not only to deepen inclusivity and equity, but also to enhance healing from trauma and promote personal and collective well-being. Professor Magee.
Thank you so very, very much, my dear Cynthia. It is really a joy and honor to be with you, to be with your entire team here with Educare, Nick and others who are supporting our engagement. It's an honor to stand with you all in reflection on your history and the legacy of the leadership of Portia and others who have helped strengthen and ground the work that brings everybody together. I like to use the metaphor of the campfire at times like this, as we're coming together for this engagement. And I am really, really honored to support you all and offering a way of centering your own well-being as you continue to deepen the work of equity that you have been exploring over the last few years. So thank you so much. As you all may know, my background is in law primarily, as was mentioned. I'm a law professor by day, I say, my primary job. But also since, with the early 2000s, after having experienced my own arc, I love the invitation to reflect on our birth stories as we begin the work. And I think of that as a metaphor for not only how we work more effectively with children, but really in a certain sense, yes, how we think about organizations, as was demonstrated and illustrated here, but also how we think about ourselves as adults in a certain sense. We're always moving through arcs of birth and rebirth. And I want to just share a little bit around some of what brought me to bring together in my work social justice and equity on the one hand, but mindfulness on the other. And I have some slides that I'll share with you along the way. And I'll go ahead actually now and maybe begin sharing those slides just to give you a sense of, let's see, there we are, where I want us to go in this conversation together. The theme that I'm using for my reflections is deepening the foundations for equity and renewal. Because I'll just say, the reason why I put renewal there, I think of equity work, yes, through lenses shaped by my experience as a lawyer and a law professor for more than 20 years. But I also really, in reflecting on all of that and looking at equity and social justice work through the lens of my own personal experience as well, as a Black woman, cisgender, female, born in this, petite body in the middle or the latter part of the 20th century, middle to latter, right? I've been here for a while. I like to name the time that I've been on the earth and I invite us all to reflect on these things together. I was born in 1967, right? So I've, seen some things and was born in that period of what's called the Civil Rights Movement, the last year of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life on this planet, and born into a family shaped by some of the legacies of racism, sexism, the interlocking oppressions that we call forth when we think about our history around race and racism as one of the elements that we are up against when we try to do when we try to turn toward social injustice and understand it more clearly. So my own family, of course, being Black and in the southern part of the United States, it was positioned in that social hierarchy in such a way that the legacies of those histories were really felt personally in my family. And so, for me, equity work has always been about, yes, becoming more engaged in the struggle to make the resources for thriving more equally available to all who need them, and to be mindful of the kind of uneven playing fields that we're meeting as we try and really support families and children in thriving in the world today. So equity, of course, requires, in my view, then thinking about how some of these legacies of inequality have led to sort of the maldistribution of the resources for thriving. And it invites us to have that courage to turn toward rather than away from ways of evening out and making those resources more freely available. But it's not easy to do this kind of work. And there are many different things that get in the way, let's say, that make it difficult for us to do the work of equity. And as I note here, just to think about one way of focusing on, let's say, the problem that I'm centering these comments on. And that problem really has to do with, again, recognizing what we are up against as we seek to do social justice work. We know that it's possible to flourish in community and in connectivity. We know that it's possible to meet each other with more of an awareness of our inherent potential. And at the same time, we know how we struggle to do that. I'm thinking about James Baldwin's remarks. Apparently, reportedly, after Martin Luther King Jr. was in fact assassinated in 1968, James Baldwin, one of the leading, black intellectuals of that time, really struggled to meet the feeling of despair that came up for him when thinking about how this man who literally preached beloved community could also then be targeted and taken down in such a violent and racist and unjust way. And so James Baldwin felt called to really reflect on how we might meet people as the miracles as they are, right? In other words, humanity is fully capable of so much in the way of love, support, healing, thriving together. We're miracles who walk in a certain sense. And James Baldwin saw that. But his other point was, he's like, how do you meet people in a way that recognizes this great human potential in everybody, really, if we can all access it somehow? It's often not not easy to do. But how do you meet that when you know, as James Baldwin put it, that we've been sort of trained, or many of us, some of us, maybe, all of us have to struggle with this part of us inside ourselves, with, as James Baldwin put it, the monsters that we have become, or that we might become, or that we can become. Again, he's thinking about how it is that a person like King could be murdered in an assassination. So in other words, there's this miracle on the one hand, and then there's the monsters that we deal with in ourselves, in our community, in our discourse. And on this slide, I'm pointing toward these, what I'm calling destabilizing social changes that prime negative emotions. I think y'all know what I'm talking about. The othering that's happening in our communities, in our political discourse, in our institutions, even in our families, as the challenges of these times, the interlocking pandemics of coronavirus and climate change, the threat of war, rampant inequality, the ongoing crisis of violence that that is unevenly impacting all communities. All of these things are leading to, again, some of the mental health distresses that we are experiencing, and frankly, some of us ourselves, but also we're seeing in our communities. And we're seeing these vulnerabilities being manipulated systematically by those who would profit or aggrandize power as or through the manipulation of the vulnerabilities, the pain, the temptation each of us feel to respond to the sense of threats or react to the sense of threat by putting up walls, defending ourselves from each other, and increasing division and polarization. So this is something that we're facing right now, and for those of you who have dedicated your lives to caring for children, to supporting families, and flourishing. This is particularly hard for us because we see how much unnecessary suffering flows from these dynamics. So this question, how is it that we can minimize harm, this kind of harm that we know we're experiencing? We see it in ourselves, our own distress, because burnout is very real right now for those of us in the caring professions, including, I'm sure, many of you on this call have experienced some of that sense of, maybe a sense of increasing futility, not sure that the efforts are really making good progress, or just feeling overwhelmed and thoroughly exhausted in a way that an evening off or morning off doesn't really give us much of a sense of restoration from. So these are real threats to our ongoing well-being. Yes, our mental health, our physical health, our ability to flourish. And so the question of how we can minimize harm, maximize the ability to flourish, increase equity and inclusion, all in the face of the challenges that I've named and the fragmentation that can result. This is a real live question for me. And I'll say that when I think about the ways of responding, I think about, again, my own experience growing up in North Carolina. I think about how it is that my grandmother, Nanny Suggs, who was born in 1906, so born in the South at a time of rising inequality, had something in common with the time that we're in, although it's different. But in that post-Reconstruction era where there was an effort to reinstate the hierarchies in a very strong way, my grandmother was born and lived out the 20th century in a way that did not provide very many opportunities for people like her. She worked in tobacco farming and sharecropping. She worked cleaning houses for people, and that was the work she was doing by the time I came along, even though she was an elder. And I will say that I witnessed my grandmother, notwithstanding all of the disappointments and challenges that she lived through, notwithstanding the hard work that she had to do every day. I saw her get up every day and center herself in ways that grounded her in the possibility of her day, the potential of her way of being with these challenges, the potential of that to really create some space, or as she would put it, make a way out of no way, to kind of keep her moving in the direction of hope and possibility. And again, this isn't to say it was any kind of Pollyanna situation, and also it is to say that for her, the restorative practices that she leaned into were Christian-based practices, were prayer-based practices. But the point for me here is simply that I, as a small child, witnessed my grandmother get up every day before dawn and center herself in those ways as a support for doing this difficult work in the world. And so for me, mindfulness is one of the ways that I support. And I want to talk to you about a kind of mindfulness, a kind of socially engaged mindfulness that can provide for us, whether we intersected with the kinds of practices that we grew up with, or whether we are experimenting with this as a standalone support. I want to suggest that what we know of as mindfulness, this ability to pay attention in certain ways, but also to become more present to the potential of the moments that we have, so that we're not constantly running on empty, but we're pausing when we need to for the self-care that is essential to keep us moving forward, to enable us to help others. You know the metaphor if you've traveled. It's not just a metaphor, it's a teaching that we get from flight attendants on every plane, but I see this as a metaphor too for what it is that I'm talking about here. In case of emergency, if the oxygen mask comes down, The instructions are to place that mask on ourselves before seeking to help others, whether children in our midst or others who might need our help. Placing the oxygen mask on ourselves first, then offering that as a metaphor for what it is that mindfulness supports us in doing. Pausing, becoming more regularly in touch with the basic goodness of our own hearts, the preciousness of the lives that we live, and of course through that having greater ability to meet the sort of miracles in the lives of others, the miraculous in the spirit of those with whom we work and for whom we seek to make the world just a little bit better. So yes, mindfulness can support us in restoring. And from that place, we can cultivate the capacity to reclaim our own ability to see what there is for us to do, to focus on the best way we might serve in a given moment, in a given, challenging scenario. And to do all of that with a kind of a heart mind of compassion and kindness. Even in the face, and even notwithstanding the threat of, yes, that empathy fatigue that so often is named compassion fatigue, but researchers are actually have been helping us understand that really the fatigue can come from putting ourselves in the shoes of others without being able to find effective ways to alleviate that distress and to take some action and recognize that we've taken some action to help in some way and to be restored in that process. It is, I think, researchers are helping us understand that as we find ways to relate more effectively to the opportunities that we do have and the changes that we are making to make the world a little bit better, that is a way of helping us deal with that empathy fatigue, actually through more skillful ways of being compassionately engaged. And I can certainly speak more about that later in the Q&A. But this socially engaged mindfulness is basically how I would describe in short how it is that we cultivate a more skillful way of being compassionately engaged. We cultivate the ability to take care of ourselves even as we do the work of supporting others. And so in the work that I do, some of you know I wrote this book called The Inner Work of Racial Justice, Healing Ourselves and Transforming Our Communities Through Mindfulness. It really came forth as a meditation on how exactly those of us who are turning toward the hard problems in our time and being a support for those, beautiful beings in our lives that we are privileged to work with, whether children, as so many of you are working with, and for me, it was my law students. The work of, really being there in these moments of difficulty, where we're helping people learn and grow, we're helping people heal and repair, it can take its toll. So pausing regularly, developing a commitment to a regular discipline of taking care of ourselves, it turns out isn't just a kind of an also maybe nice to have, like something we do when we have a moment. But if we want to do this work in a sustainable fashion, if we want to be there for communities and for our own families, for ourselves over the long haul, and I say that because I want to underscore that taking time for ourselves is not selfish. I think of this as a necessary component to doing social work. In fact, I think of it as a necessary component to justice in the world. So much so that I tend to refer to the personal practices of mindfulness as a support for social justice, as personal justice work. And so this personal dimension of the socially engaged mindfulness practice is really, really important. And it's the foundation for everything. It's akin to my grandmother waking up and taking time before coming out and taking care of the family and then going off to work to center herself. 20, 30, 40 minutes of practicing self-awareness, centering prayer, reconnecting to the sense of her own precious life as a ground for then coming out and being, more in touch with her power. That power which when in combination with the power of others is unstoppable. So I see this kind of socially engaged mindfulness rooted in this personally just mindfulness, right, that we embark on as a part of our own commitment to professional work, to professional development for the work we do. I really do see this as the invitation to renew on multiple levels, personally, interpersonally, and collectively, that is at the heart of what we are seeking to manifest in the work of social justice. Because if you think about it, whether we're talking about, if we tend to think of justice as bringing a lawsuit when we need to, or getting reparations when we need to, changing policies, all of that very important to making a more just world. But if as we do that work, we're not at the same time repairing ourselves, finding ways of amplifying the miracle in each of us, in other words, if at the same time we're not transforming ourselves and our way of being together in ways that really give us access more to a sense of almost, I'll call it spiritual healing, then I think we're missing the deep call that is inherent in what we call social justice work. So I think of this socially engaged mindfulness as inherently kind of a holistically embodied healing practice, compassionate in every way because it is about minimizing harm and taking actions to minimize the harm, the threat of harm to ourselves and to others. And a practice that can deepen the capacity we have to connect in the social realm, even in the face of what has been referred to as the stunning disconnections of the moment that we're in. So the kind of mindfulness then that I'm talking about here is grounded in an ethic of care. As I've said more than once already, we are grounding these practices in the commitment to minimizing harm, first to ourselves, knowing that we are at risk. Existentially in these times, we know there are many threats to our well-being. So taking a deep breath and pausing, I already placed one hand over my heart as I invite each of us to take a deep breath right here with me. And just feeling as we do so, the ground of support beneath us. And so I really want us to maybe experiment a little bit of this kind of practice that I'm suggesting here might really be more of a ground for this work. If we can pause in a way that allows us to touch in to what I'm talking about when I talk about these practices as a means for supporting personal justice. I'm going to stop the share for a minute. And I see someone's asking for a copy of the slides. Yes, we'll make the slides available for sure. But what I'd like us to do now is pause the chat just for a moment and really experiment with this kind of practice that I'm describing. So I, as many meditation teachers, so I'm a law professor who's been trained in teaching meditation, and I've been offering meditation to lawyers and social justice advocates for years now. And we don't need a special thing like a bell, but I happen to have one. And what I'd like to invite for the next few moments is just pausing. Whatever it is you may be involved in, you might have, like me, you have these little devices probably very close to you everywhere. And the invitation might be, again, if you're using that device to be engaged here, keep it on. But otherwise, let's pause. Let's create together a place and permission to just turn toward our own experience of this moment, resting however you happen to find yourself right now, whether it's in a chair or standing or even lying down. Taking a few moments to just breathe and feel the body in this moment, the points of contact between the body and the chair that is supporting you right now. And beneath that, the floor that's supporting you. Perhaps you have the feet on the floor, maybe placing them both as flat as you can, just so you can really feel the energetic connection between the body and this ground that is supporting you. Because beneath the floor and all the foundations underneath that, yes, we're connected with this earth. And as we breathe in and out, allowing these few moments of reconnecting to the body, feeling the earth beneath us, this earth that we all share in this moment and in every moment of our lives. I'm going to ring the bell here and support us lightly in just a kind of awareness of breath and body and connecting practice that will give you a taste of what may give you a taste. That's the question. Let's see what it does as an example of how these practices can support us in our personal work of sustaining ourselves. So allow the sound of the bell as you hear it to support you in pausing and turning for the moment just to the inner experience that I'll help guide you through for the next few minutes. So perhaps taking one or two deeper than usual breaths for you. And as you do so, just allowing yourself to come just a little bit more fully into awareness of the body in this moment, just resting and breathing. Feeling the body as a whole resting right here, right now, and perhaps allowing your attention for the next few breaths to just focus on the sensations of breathing in and breathing out. Noticing the in-breath or the out-breath, wherever you happen to be right now. And just continuing to follow along. Maybe investigating for the moment whether we're breathing deeply or maybe we're breathing in a way that's kind of a medium level of depth, or maybe it's a little short and shallow. Really just noticing. Inviting the spirit of curiosity right to the experience, this simple and beautiful experience of just sitting and breathing. And as we allow ourselves to come home to the sensations of sitting and breathing, as much as possible, see if you can infuse this practice with a kind of loving embrace of whatever it is that's coming up for you right now. So if as you pause you feel a little bit of difficult emotion coming up, sadness or anxiety, I'm going to invite you to place one hand or both hands over the heart. And just allow yourself to consciously invite touching into, in whatever way you're able to feel it, the sense of loving care that you carry into each moment of your own experience. For some of us, it's easier for us to feel this loving care as we direct it to others. But in this moment, I want to invite you to just feel the basic goodness, the basic quality of love that is in your body and in your being right now. And see if you can really sense into where you feel that in the body. For me, it's in the region of the chest that I associate with the heart. But it could be somewhere else in your own body and being right now. But maybe it's in the region of the belly. Maybe it's in the region of the forehead. Wherever it happens to be for you, the invitation is to see if you can expand the sense of that basic goodness, love and care that you carry. The quality of that. Is there a warmth associated with it? Is there a lightness associated with it? And however you happen to sense this right now, just see if you can open up, not allowing any obstruction, anything to get in the way of this inner goodness, this warmth, this light that is a part of your being right here, right now. Such that if we don't get in the way, just imagine it might flood and flow into all of the places within that are broken or sad or feeling some of the challenges of this moment. Seeing if we can allow the love, the warmth to spill into the places that are calling for healing, maybe the cracks in the heart, maybe the painful legacies of our own traumas that we experience, sometimes being re-triggered in these times. So whatever is coming up for you, again, being gentle and allowing just what way of touching into your own challenges, just enough of awareness of that to support really being present to your own needs for healing and support. And then being courageous about bringing forth the love that is within you right here, right now. For some of us, it helps to envision a place where we have been, or maybe we imagine going. Visualize that place as a support for healing in these moments where we're touching into our own distress. Or maybe it's a person or even a pet. Visualizing a being, the face of someone who has cared for you, food that has been served for you, that is nurturing. So now we're shifting into a visualization practice that can help us enhance the sense of well-being when we need it. So if just feeling the sense of inner goodness is a challenge, maybe calling to mind those visualizations that help you reconnect with what is already in your body. That can be a source of healing. These memories of more nourishing times, places, people that you've been in the presence of, and calling forth in vivid, full color the memory of those places, the sights, scents, smells associated with being nurtured, cared for, at ease. And as we visualize as best we can, if that is the method of practice that we're engaging, or as we touch into the warmth within us, almost imagining or visualizing, again, almost like the sun in our body and being expanding outward, warming the whole body, warming perhaps any who might be in our midst at this moment. So however it is that we're practicing right now with visualization, with feeling the warmth within us, allowing ourselves to be nourished by some element of this practice as a support for coming home to your own well-being. So if you've placed one hand over the heart, or maybe both hands over the heart, or you've taken the other hand, the invitation might be to place it just beneath the belly button, breathing in and breathing out. My students say that this is somewhat like giving ourselves a hug when we need it. And now just imagine, yes, not being a barrier to allowing this love or warmth or inner goodness, sense of being nurtured, to flow outward. In this practice, there's no particular way that we need to direct this, but just to get out of the way and allow the goodness within us. It might flow to those on this call, someone on this call who might be in particular need right now of extra support. We extend the wish for well-being to you. It might flow to those that we're going to serve today, some particular family, child, or community that we know to be in distress, whether near or far. So the invitation is to just recognize that we have the power in these moments that we call mindfulness, not only to cultivate well-being for ourselves, but to expand the reach of that well-being to those near, far, to the north, west, east, south, as far as we can imagine. And to know that as we engage in these practices, we're not alone. Certainly we're not alone right now. And we can imagine each of us connecting in a network that has power and is in this moment reconnecting with that power to make a difference, starting right where we are and extending beyond measure from there. So just breathing, allowing the visualizations to subside for a moment. Breathing in and breathing out, just coming home to that simple, basic, foundational support in the breathing body, in the body knowing its capacity for love, for wellness, for being empowered, for inherently belonging, and just resting in this. And as we bring this practice to a close, perhaps noticing, if you will, a feeling or a phrase that's coming up for you to capture what this experiment has been like for you, what you're feeling in your body right now, a thought, an image that might in some way support you when the going gets rough, as it will, as we continue to do this work on this day and beyond. So I want to take a moment now and invite opening up the chat once again. And I wonder what that practice was like for you all as a touchstone into what this work of socially engaged mindfulness, or mindfulness with the robustness to not only help us heal ourselves, but help us heal each other, help us do the work of improving systems and repairing institutions. We're talking about a robust kind of mindfulness here, but it starts with ourselves. So I'm wondering if as you gently ease out of or transition out of that moment of meditation, if there's a word or a phrase you'd like to share, and again, opening the chat to enable that, to let us experience in some way what comes up for us when we engage in mindfulness. And to begin to explore how this practice might support us, not only for enhancing our own well-being, but being a deeper more resourced support for others. I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now, but I want to continue opening that chat and inviting. Yeah, I see it. Thank you so much. Keith, thank you so much. Love the flight attendant metaphor. Yeah, and we'll try to use it often when I need that reflective pause to get refocused on the work. Thank you so much, Keith. Absolutely. Allowing the metaphor of putting the oxygen mask on ourselves first. Because I think for those of us who are committed to helping others, it can be difficult for us to understand how important it is for us to actually take time to care for ourselves, to restore, to regularly take these small steps that are not small to replenish, to rest, to get to know the signs of distress and overwhelm and burnout before we find ourselves deeply struggling. And for me, mindfulness is a support for that. Recognizing there is this acronym that I'll offer here as a support for you as you think about mindfulness as a resource. It's called RAIN, R-A-I-N. R, mindfulness helps us recognize just what we're up against personally, interpersonally, and systemically. So if it's that we're feeling anxious, the R in the mindfulness supporting acronym is for recognizing, yeah, this is what anxiety feels like. I'm going to pause for a moment and just notice that. A, accept, R-A, the RAIN acronym. We're accepting for the moment, yeah, I'm feeling anxious. Can I bring a little bit of loving support to this moment? This is what anxiousness feels like in my body. And I'm pausing to just allow myself to feel nourished, to feel met in this moment with attending, right? Not with ignoring what the body is calling for. If it needs a timeout, if it needs a break. So the R-A of the RAIN acronym, so the R is for recognize, A is for accept, I is for investigating. If I'm feeling anxious, what are some of the inputs of that? Have I been imbibing too much social media today? Do I need a break from that? Have I been catastrophizing? Think of all the negative things that could happen as a result of some new announcement, some new policy, some Supreme Court decision. Do I need a moment to recognize that my thoughts are not reality? That I don't have to follow every single thought, that indeed we're not our thoughts. That ability to sort of bear witness to thinking as it happens is also a gift of mindfulness practice. And to just pause and to sort of recognize, yes, there's thoughts coming up and there are feelings associated with those thoughts. So the R-A-I in the RAIN acronym, recognize, accept, investigate. And as we investigate, notice thoughts, emotions, right? What are the emotions associated with these thoughts? Fear, more anxiety, sadness, rage. In these moments of mindfulness, we open up the welcome mat to really be human, to feel what we need to feel, so that we can heal what we need to heal. So when we investigate in the RAIN acronym, recognize, accept, investigate, I, we're looking at, yes, thoughts, emotions, and sensations in the body with love, with care, not judgment. And we're inquiring into how might we choose to respond to what we see rather than react. We start to see the power we have. We have a range of different ways of responding, always, to everything. And we're in charge, in a certain sense. Even though we're not able to control everything, we can control how we respond to the changes that we're up against. So that RAIN acronym, you recognize, accept, you investigate in the ways that I've described, and you do so at the end with that quality of nurturing and with a quality of not attaching to what you're experiencing. You're opening up to the potential in every moment for something new to be born, something we didn't anticipate in the positive direction, just as these things that happen, surprisingly, that throw us off our game, that we don't think are so positive. Remember, there's always also unexpected good happening. So thank you so much. So that recognize, accept, investigate with nurturing and non-attachment, if you will, that's an acronym to support us in thinking about and experimenting with mindfulness as a personal and interpersonal and collective support. I see notes here in the chat. I just think about how this can be integrated into everyday life and the professional practice. Yes. This is why I'm here. To support you all in thinking about how you can integrate this into your personal and interpersonal work. In my book, I talk about early on the idea of the pause. You don't have to use the fancy word mindfulness if that doesn't resonate with the people that you are working with, but just simply to take a moment to pause and to restore. Yeah. In schools, yes, there's meditation or mindfulness where the whole school stops and does breathing and meditation practices. We can invite this into our workplaces, into our meeting spaces. In the work that I do with lawyers and judges, more and more, some of the judges are inviting a pause in their courtrooms. And one of my colleagues who has done this has gotten these beautiful notes from criminal defendants who, in the space of that courtroom where the judge has invited a pause and really listened to all the parties, including a defendant who has wanted to speak, we have heard testimony of how folks engaged in those courtroom spaces feel met, restored, a sense of dignity just by being given a kind of a moment to breathe that they hadn't felt in a very long time. And so if we pause, we can create the space to listen more deeply. And we know that in an interpersonal sense, listening is everything. Listening feels like love to many people. It is, for most of us, a really important aspect of what it means to feel cared for, to be listened to. And mindfulness can support us in listening more effectively. I'm looking at other notes here. We currently have the children engage in calm classroom, which brings mindfulness to the children. Huge success. Yeah, and families are practicing mindfulness at home. Absolutely. This is beautiful. And I guess with this practice today, want you to recognize the importance of embedding this in your own everyday. Whether if for some of us, we might embed it with movement practice because we know we also need some exercise. So mindful walking. And for me, that involves not listening. I don't happen to necessarily listen to music when I walk these days, or even a meditation app. You can do those things. For me, I walk to connect, to kind of reconnect with the living, breathing world. So the sounds of birds, if I can feel, the mist falling on a kind of a dewy morning, or notice the trees and sort of breathe in that the oxygen, releasing that carbon dioxide, knowing that we are in a live universe all the time. These things wake me up, and mindful walking becomes a kind of a practice that embeds both movement and awareness. So there's so many different ways that we can embed not just a mindfulness as a focusing, a kind of a calming practice, but as an energizing, empowering practice that helps remind us of our power, of the fact that we inherently belong. So I want to see if there's maybe one final question or reflection, because we are coming on at time. Yeah, so I'm seeing that people are adapting and adopting practices that support cultivation of mindfulness. Clayton's Embrace program is being named here in the chat. I want to invite specifically in this last few minutes, what challenges are you feeling? Where are the edge points? because this is why I'm here, to support those who are really embracing, experimenting with this, but finding some challenges. How can we help each other through those is a real question. And as we bring this session to a close, maybe just keeping alive that spirit of inquiry. How can we support each other in, as I named it in the opening slide, deepening the work? To me, mindfulness is really an invitation to deepen our ethic of care. So it's not just about pausing and calming, but it really is founded in loving embrace of our own experience and of each other's. So how can we avoid slipping out of these kinds of mindfulness practices when things get tough? I think that's where the regular practices comes in. Like, in other words, if we do this on a regular daily basis, and we begin to see this as a way of being that can support us in all things, in listening to the music we love more richly, and being with our family, then it really is there. We notice it. We notice when it's slipping more readily, and we can pause. And here's another practice acronym, the STOP acronym, STOP. And you can find, I've written about this acronym in Mindfulness Magazine. If you look up Rhonda Magee, mindfulness.org, you'll see this acronym. But just stop. So in those moments when you're feeling challenged and you're feeling things getting tough, the S of stops, literally pause, right? Take, and T, S-T, take a conscious breath. Reground yourself. You're feeling anger. You're hearing anger in the room. So S, stop, T, take a conscious breath. O, observe what's happening. Oh, okay, this is anger. There's anger here. I'm being in reaction to that. I'm feeling judged. I'm feeling the temptation to respond with anger. So again, we're observing, we're recognizing, we're seeing more of what there is to see. And in the space of the observation, seeing that we can also choose. Oh, there's also calmness here. There's also skillfulness here. I can feel the ground beneath me, and I can choose to pause, get back to this person when I have more information, take a break, come back when we've calmed our emotions a little bit, but to stay in engagement from this place of replenishment. So STO, stop, take a breath, observe, and then P, proceed with presence. So that STOP acronym can help us in this portable way access mindfulness. I had no idea STOP was yours. Yes. So the STOP practice. I've got all kinds of acronyms. I'm writing another one on using love. So stay tuned. If anybody's interested in continuing to work with some of the practices that I've shared here, certainly you can access them through this book and through the audiobook version where I guide the practices. If those of you who don't really so much love reading and then trying to meditate, but I have read the audiobook myself on audible.com, and it's full of practices. But I'm also continually offering more. So please stay connected with me at my community at rhondavmagee.com. You can find me there. So we are at time, my dears. Yeah. Pace, pause, awareness, calm, embrace. I love it. Thank you, Brenda. So yes, thank you so much. May you be well, safe, and connected on your journey from here. Thank you.
Wow. Woo-wee. Thank you, Rhonda. And I know if you could hear them, they would all be clapping. I hope that the community was able to engage in the practice of just mindfulness. And there were so many nuggets of self-care in your presentation. I was trying to chat and put in the question. It wasn't working. So apparently it wasn't meant for me to put it in there. But what I want to say is that, this is about why we brought you here is in service of the collaboration and the creating of this caring community of the Educare Learning Network. So purposeful, you guys. This was a purposeful, conscious decision by the Network Planning Committee to have Professor Magee join us today. And I do hope that it deepens our capacity to flourish together as a network as we embark on our 3-year strategic direction. And finally, I'll just say that, I often invoke the power of the pause personally. And people often wonder, like, what's she doing? But it actually supports slowing everything down and trying to analyze what's going on. I think that the next step sometimes is actually, and then what, right? Like just really slowing the pace of things. So we are not talking over one another, talking at one another, not listening to one another, but really create the space where we can dialogue together, listen and understand without some of the things that you talked about, which is the anxiety and the fear and the reactionary response that, so often that's how we've been socialized. So I just love the thought of deepening our ethic of care. And with that, I'll just say thank you so much. And we really enjoyed your engagement today. So again, thank you so much, Professor Magee.
Thank you, my dear. Be well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, and I am supposed to say a reminder. Please complete your evaluations for those that are still connected. Thank you.